Hey, welcome to the OTK Brute Demon Hunter Overview and Mulligan Guide. This deck is stupid fun. Also, it's beginning to gain steam on the ladder, and I can guarantee that you're going to see this deck in this week's Grandmasters. Somebody's bringing it, I don't know how many people, but it's definitely going to be there. The deck is fun, just because it draws a lot of cards. Who doesn't like to draw a lot of cards? It's also fun because you have some really powerful turns that you're going to get to play in the form of the OTK, and also just flooding the board with the big 6-7 ironbound brutes. With that, we're going to jump into the overview of the deck. First, we need to understand what our win conditions are. In other words, what's the general game plan for how this deck is going to win games? The primary win condition here is the OTK. You're going to execute the OTK exactly the same way as previous iterations of the Demon Hunter OTK deck. Il'gynoth, Guild Trader, Moarg, and Fellscream Blast is going to hit for 36 damage. Keep in mind, you're not going to be paying full mana cost for these cards because they're going to be discounted either by the individual quest parts or when you play the quest reward purchase. Of course, the 7/7 reduces the cost of cards drawn the rest of the game by 2 mana. Huge discount.
Pleasure doing business.
It's also important to note here that Guild Trader is extremely important to the OTK. It's the only spell damage that we have in the deck. There's going to be games where you're forced to use the Guild Trader to clear a particularly threatening board. You're just going to have to do that sometimes in order to stay in the game, but as soon as you do that, you lose a big chunk of power from your OTK turn. So just keep in mind, without Guild Trader, the 2 Moarg combo is only going to hit for 12. So if you're able to add a 3rd Moarg, it's 24. The 4th Moarg is going to get you up to 48 damage. We really want to save the Guild Trader as much as possible. So your first option for clearing the board is going to be Immolation Aura combined with a Moarg or 2 for board clear. And it's just easier to use the Moargs, or rather it's preferential to use the Moargs because we can actually create additional Moargs with Philosophy, in addition to the fact that there's 2 Moargs in the deck and only 1 Guild Trader. Guild Trader is super important. We want to make sure that we don't waste it. On a side note here, reason why that we use Guild Trader over something like a Talented Arcanist is because of the tradable tag. You can trade it to advance the quest, cycle it through your deck, and it's 4 mana cost versus Talented Arcanist is only 2 mana. Doesn't really matter. We're never going to be paying full cost when we go to play it. It's going to be discounted in one way or another. So Guild Trader, really good in the deck, key and important. The secondary win condition here is going to be the Brute Flood. So early in the game, if you're able to draw a lot of cards and you can get your Brute discounted to 0 or extremely cheap, and then possibly you could also copy it with Philosophy. You could drop, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 Ironbound Brutes, 6/7s, possibly 7/8s. Just keep in mind that if you're going to copy the Brutes with Philosophy, it's going to reduce the number of Moarg Artificers that you're going to have access to. But before going for a big Brute turn, you also really want to think, can my opponents clear this board with these Brutes before they can attack? So anytime I'm playing like the Brute Flood strategy, it's going to be based on what's in your hand, what the turn is, kind of the flow of the game. But before you're going to throw all the Brutes on the board and use your Philosophies to get additional copies, just keep in mind, can my opponent clear this board before they get to attack at least one time? You really need those Brutes to be able to hit your opponent in the face at least once, because you need to reduce your opponent's health total. Otherwise, you may struggle for lethal damage later in the game. And also keep in mind, decks like Warlock are going to be able to heal a lot, so that damage could be irrelevant anyway. So primary win condition is going to be the OTK. The Brute Flood is a secondary win condition. Just make sure you think it through before you commit to the Brute Flood. Now for the Mulligan. In the opening hand, you're going to want to keep the quest, of course, Tusk Piercer, Sigil of Alacrity, and Spectral Sight. Generally speaking, you just want to draw cards, complete the quest as quickly as possible. It's not uncommon to complete the individual parts of the quest, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, and then potentially playing the quest reward 7-7 Kurtrus on turn 6, and then really just start looking to draw additional cards and set up the OTK. Just kind of general advice when you're playing the deck, be sure to count how many cards you can draw each turn so that you can complete the individual quest parts. If you come up one card short, it's going to make you really, really sad. Don't forget also to count the tradable cards. You can cycle the tradable cards. Keep in mind also that when you play acrobatics, if you're able to play the 2 cards you draw from acrobatics, you're going to draw 2 additional cards. And then also just keep in mind too that the card that you draw naturally at the beginning of your turn also counts. So part 2 and part 3, you need to draw 5 cards in the same turn. You're already drawing 1 by default, so you only really need to be able to draw an additional 4. And speaking of the additional 4 cards, that brings us over to Glide. Glide will single-handedly complete any individual quest part. The most cards that you have to draw in any individual quest part is 5. Again, you have the 1 that you draw naturally. Glide will draw an additional 4. Don't be afraid to glide a large hand back into your deck. It's totally fine. The deck has plenty of card draw. We're going to be able to get those cards back into our hand. The key here is just complete the quest reward, or complete the quest as quickly as possible. And then after you play that quest reward, you're going to be able to draw those cards, and they're going to be 2 mana cheaper. Outcasting Glide on a large opponent's hand is just icing on the cake, especially against like Warlock and Mage decks. Sometimes those decks can have lots of cards in their hands, and being able to shuffle those cards, or shove those cards, as I like to say, back into your opponent's deck is really going to hurt their ability to execute their own game plan. You don't have to. I think the better way is actually to focus on our game plan and setting up the OTK, completing the quest. But if you're able to do that at the same time as advancing your own game plan, you set them back. As you take a step forward, increases the likelihood that we're going to be able to win here. That's the deck. Play the quest, draw cards, set up the OTK, and win. Alternatively, you can march out an army of Irebound Brutes to kill your opponent just with an overwhelming board presence. Outside of that, just don't forget to stay safe. You can drop an individual Brute to soak minion hits on the board. Sometimes your opponent is going to want to deal with it because it is a big minion. They don't want to get hit by it at all. So they can spend their turn either killing it with minions they have on board, which saves us from taking damage, or they may have to use additional cards just to be able to remove that Brute. Also, make sure that you're staying safe. There's a few decks in the format right now that have the ability to go wide with smaller minions. This deck does have 2 copies of Immolation Aura, and keep in mind that if you play it with Moarg, you can really clear a lot of those boards, really with just 1 Moarg, 1 Immolation Aura. Again, there's probably going to be games where you're going to have to use the Guild Trader. It's either going to be, Guild Trader Immolation Aura, or you simply just die. But really try to get by with just using the Moargs in every situation that you can. Guild Trader, super important to the OTK. Also keep in mind, you can use 1 Fellscream Blast for removal and healing, and still maintain the other copy to have the OTK later in the game. You're guaranteed not to win if you're dead, so sometimes you do have to use your resources in that fashion. So thank you for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button for more Hearthstone content, and good luck. Have fun out on the ladder.